the situation in Belgium today, about the national problem, you have to know the whole history of Belgium, which starts in 1830. I'm not going to do that. It's important, you know, but I'm not going to do that. I will go to the situation today. Now, what is Belgium? Belgium existed since 1830, thanks to the British, the Russians, the French. Okay. But it became a federal state in the 90s of last century, so not long ago. I will explain what it is, a federal state. When I speak about federal things, the federal government, the federal parliament, I'm talking about the whole of Belgium. Federal means national in that sense. Okay, now what does it mean concretely? It means that we have different regions and different communities, and it's very, very complicated. For example, there is the Flemish region, which is the majority of the population, it's, let's say 6 million people. Then you have the Walloon region, which is, let's say, 3.5, 4 million people. Okay. Then you have Brussels, which is an island, a French-speaking island in the middle of Flanders. Very strange situation, which is also a region. It has its own government. So each region has its own government, parliament, and so on. But there is also a community of French-speaking people, which is the community of the Walloons and Brussels population together. French-speaking Brussels population, because the Flemish have another situation. And then there is in Wallonia, there is a small German-speaking population. The reason is that Belgium won the war against Germany in 1914, being a big country, but with a little help of some other imperialist countries. And Germany had to give a small territory to Belgium. Now, the very strange thing is that that German population is the most Belgian, the most pro-Belgian population of Belgium. It's very strange. No, you must understand that this division between communities and regions, with I think we have 5 governments, or 6 governments, is incredibly difficult to manage the country. Because, for example, ecological problems. Who is going to decide that this river coming out of that region and that community, who will decide about it? So it's very difficult. And it becomes more and more, and most parties agree to it, counterproductive. Because it's very difficult to manage the country. Okay. Now, politically, what's happening today? Today, the federal government, so the national government, is dominated by a Flemish national party. It's the New Flemish Alliance. Now, that party is, in fact, a nationalist Flemish neoliberal party. It's not a fascist or not an extreme right-wing party. It's typically a neoliberal party. It's the first clause in its constitution is Flanders has to become independent. Now, in reality, being a neoliberal party and being linked to Belgian capitalism, it's easy to say that, but it's not easy to do it. So, in fact, since that party became the leading party in the government, they say, let's wait with independence. Perhaps there will be the possibility to build what they call a confederalism, strange word, which means that even more power, autonomy to the different regions. But in reality, the priority of that party is Belgian economy. And that's what they say openly. Okay, now, it's very strange too, because the situation, the coalition government, the national coalition government is dominated by that Flemish national neoliberal party, but together with a very small liberal French-speaking party. So in fact, it's really the Flemish party who determines what's going on in Belgium. And the big enemy of that party is socialism. Social Democrats are the big enemies of that neoliberal party. They want to destroy that. They want to attack the trade union movements in both parts of the country. They want to attack social security. Now, one of the big problems is that in the nationalist idea of the Flemish, which are the most developed industrial part of the country today, which was not the case 50, 60, 70 years ago, they say the Walloons are lazy people and we don't want to pay social security for them. And that's an ideology they try to diffuse in the whole of the country. And one of the objectives is to cut social security. So normally social security is national, is federal, but the Flemish nationalists want to split it, to divide it, so that they have more money for themselves and they don't have to aid the Walloon lazy, jobless people. Well, I don't mean that they are lazy. That's the language that is used. The reason for that is the nationalist, reactionary, petty bourgeois origin of the Flemish national movement. There has never been a proletarian national movement in Flanders. Socialist parties were not interested in the Flemish question, which was a big idiocy of the socialist parties, because it gave right-wing and Catholicism the means to use national problems and to fight for it. So that's what they want. Now, when they speak about independence, we have to look around. Who wants independence in Flanders? No one. Almost no one. It's the greatest part of the population say, no, we don't want independence. It's a crazy idea. And it's certainly a crazy idea because what shall we do with Brussels, which is an island, French-speaking island in the middle of Flanders? How can we solve that problem? And it's indeed unsolvable. So people don't want, the majority of the people don't want independence. The only who really want independence is a small party, but a very dangerous party, which is the Flemish Vlaams Belang. How to translate that? Flemish Interest, that's the name of the party. And the leadership of that party has a Nazi history. So, and they play the racist game, the purity of the population, the Walloons are not really Germanic, and so on. That's the language they use. But it's an important party because it captures part of the very right-wing petty bourgeois ideas of Flemish traditions. Okay, that's the real situation. Now, well, personally, I'm against independence of Flanders. I don't think it's a crazy thing to do, but we have to find a solution where the ideas of the Walloons are stealing our money, and there is a transfer from money from the rich part of the country to the poor country. You know all the problems. You have the same thing in Catalonia, and the same problem, I think, in Scotland, perhaps. I'm not a specialist about Scotland. Okay. No, according to me, the only way to find a solution for that is that the trade union movement and all the working class organizations analyze that problem. Not the bourgeoisie, not the petty bourgeois movements, but that the working class itself and its organizations study the problem and publish the reality of it, and not what is produced and set by demagogical elements of nationalism. And okay, that's the only solution. Now, I want to go back to Catalonia. The Catalonian question has a very difficult origin. So the Spanish, nationalist Spanish state, if we say that, from Franco on, wants Spain una e grande, one and big. unity. We are all Spanish and that's it. And the Catalonians, for example, after Franco's regime, were not allowed to speak their own language. So the only way where they could shout their own language was with the Football Barça. This Football Club Barcelona. There they could shout in the Catalonian language. And during the Civil War, as you know, Catalonia was one of the left-wing regions during the Civil War, with anarchists, Stalinists, Trotskyists, whatever you want. And so that tradition of the Catalonian people is very strong. And so when they look at Spain as an enemy, as someone who oppressed them culturally. And I believe, but it's a very difficult question and we can discuss about it, that a part of the Catalonian bourgeoisie is playing a game, a very dangerous game, yes, for asking independence. No, that's one thing. So some of the left agree with them and so on. It's very difficult and I'm not going to take sides there. The only thing I want to say about it, that if a people wants independence, it has the right to ask for it and it has the right to vote for it. So you can say, even if I don't agree with independence of Catalonia, I agree with the right of the people in Catalonia, not only the Catalonians, but the Spanish people who live in Catalonia, to vote about that. That's a right, and there is no discussion about it. It's an unconditional right, the right of self-determination of the people. That's a positive thing. If nationalism can help to break authoritarian, oppressing nationalism, then it is a good thing. So we should support it. It's a little bit the same thing as national liberation struggles. When I give you an example of India, India originally was there was no nationalism in India. There were living villages, very separated, small villages of farmers, and they had to pay the landlord something. And then the British came, and the British built railways, and they introduced sheep cotton, and they introduced zamindars. I don't know if you know what the zamindars are. Landlords who collect revenue and so on. And that unified, in a certain sense, the Indian population. And by unifying that Indian population through industrial intervention, it brought people together. And that was a very good thing for liberation struggle, that they could unite people and unite the people against British imperialism. So there is a double function with industrialization. It oppresses people because the British cotton industry destroyed the Indian home industry, which is very negative. The consequences of this are still existing today. On the other hand, it united in a certain way the Indian population. Now, the result of that struggle was not a socialist country or an anti-capitalist country. India today is a capitalist state. So that national liberation struggle, where the leaders were the Indian bourgeoisie and petty bourgeoisie, produced a country that was not socialist at all. That's a difference, for example, with liberation struggles as in China, where the peasantry under communist leadership constructed a very different kind of state. I'm not talking about China today, because China today is again a capitalist country. Now, when Belgium started to exist in 1830, 1% of the population had the right to vote. And this was the bourgeoisie and the aristocratic landowners. Now, their language was French, because that was the cultural language of the rich. And the idea was, since we are a nation state, which means that all the classes organically form one group. The workers have to work, the peasants have to produce food, the capitalists invest, and so on. So each has its task. So organic concept of the country. So they imposed French as the national language of the country. Now the problem was that most people didn't understand one word of French. And what happened was that the petty bourgeoisie, the cultural petty bourgeoisie of Flanders, started to fight for the right of the people to use their own language. And that was a very difficult fight. And it was won, I think, not so long ago, in the complete sense that in industry, the owners of industry in Flanders used French until 1970. And at that moment that was abolished. They were obliged, they had to speak the language of the people with the trade union people and so on. So until then, so you see there's a long history of cultural struggle of the population for their own language as an identity, as a cultural identity of what we are. Now, it's not an easy question, that language question, because there's a lot of nation states where there is no one language. For example, I take the Swiss. Switzerland is a nation state, and people are strung together, even if they speak different languages, they all say, we are Swiss and we belong to the Swiss nation. You can have nation states, you can have nationalities where people have different ways to live, but still feel themselves together as a nation state, not as a nation, not as a nationality, but as a nation state. Marx was fighting for the unity, the national unity of Germany, 1848. Very strange. In the same Communist Manifesto, he says, working class has no country, has no fatherland. Very strange. Working class has no fatherland, at the same time he's fighting for a united Germany. So, in fact, the Communist Manifesto was ahead of its time. And there's another thing in the Communist Manifesto which is interesting, is he says the working class has first to become dominating politically inside the nation. It has to become a nation itself. It has to become a nation in itself, but, he says Marx, not a nation in the bourgeois sense. The nation in the bourgeois sense is the organic unity of all the different classes in function of, in function today of imperialism, wars and exploitation. So that's what the Communist Manifesto is saying. Now the second thing is the discussion between Lenin and Rosa Luxemburg, which is a very difficult discussion. Rosa Luxemburg said there is no principle that says that there is a right for independence for people. She says it. There is no principle about it. She says every time we have to look at the concrete situation and then see what we will do, how we will defend the thing. And that's a little bit like Marx, because Marx and Engels, they were in favor of very big countries. Only the very big countries were the good countries, where you have a big working class, and with a big working class you can make a big revolution more easily. No, that was very dangerous of Marx and certainly of Engels to say that. Rosa Luxemburg was for autonomy, but she was not for independence of Poland. Very strange. While Marx was for the independence of Poland and also the German Second International for the independence of Poland. So it's not easy, because Rosa Luxemburg, if Poland becomes independent, it will be a Poland of the Szlachta. The Szlachta is the aristocracy who dominates the Polish history. And there was in the struggle of Poland for independence or nationalism, there was no bourgeois leadership. It was also always the leadership of the landed aristocracy. So Rosa Luxemburg was against the independence of Poland for that reason. It will not produce a proletarian state. It's difficult for me to accept that idea, because if the Polish population, whatever they are, and it's very difficult to decide who is the real population. Am I going to decide who is the real Pole and the false Pole? If the people in general have the opinion, not the public opinion which is produced, of course that plays a role, because in Belgium, in Flanders, nationalism is also produced by the media, the nationalist media. But if the people in general want independence, even if they are misguided, even if they make false things, who am I to say that they are, who am I as a dictator who's going to, or the vanguard of the party or whatever, who am I to say that they are not allowed to do that? So are we for autonomy? Are we for the self-regulation of people or not? Or are we for a dictatorship of the party who is going to say what people should do? So there is a problem. So, and that's a problem we always encounter in struggles for nationality, autonomy, and so on. For example, you mentioned Italy. No, the movement, the Padana, the northern Italy movement, is in fact a movement of right-wing nationalist organizations. And the only thing about it is what I call money nationalism. It's about money. It's not about cultural identity of the northern Italy against the stupid terroni, as they say in Italy, the peasants of the south. It's nonsense. So it's real money nationalism. Flanders is money nationalism too, because they don't want to be in solidarity with other populations. But it's not always like that. So you can have a solidarity nationalism. If the First International was in solidarity with Polish independence, it was a very good thing. It was about solidarity between the working classes and the oppressed people, not only the working classes, but all the oppressed people, in the cultural sense or whatever, to be together, to fight together. And the fight was against the Tsarist regime, of course, which was the prison of peoples. That's why Lenin understood very well, if we want to really to fight against Tsarism, we have to give the possibility to the populations with different languages and mentality, Islamic people and so on, like all those different peoples in the former Soviet Union, former Russia, to give them the right to do that. Otherwise we can't have unity. That is a problem. If you say that, how can we unite people when there are nationalist reactions and things, and we are different, and they speak that and they speak that and I don't do that? If you want to unite people, you have to consider also the difference between the people and understand what makes that difference and give them possibilities. You have to understand that there are differences and you have to defend the fact that there are differences. Mm-hmm. And that's the only possibility to have solidarity. I don't know. If you are working in a trade union and you have a Turk there and you have a Pakistani there and you have an Englishman there, and then you say, okay, you want to pray? We give you the right to pray on your topic as an Islamic and whatever it is. But we will fight together against the boss. And that's the only way to do it, I think. It's the same with the women's movement. So say the women, that's a problem because they make trouble in the party and so on. No, you have to unite with the women because we can't transform society if we are not all together. But you have to give the possibility of autonomy to the women to discuss their own problems. And I think that's in the national struggle the same thing. Tito was the guy who understood very well the problems of between the Serbs and the Croats and the Slovenes and so on. So his war against the Germans for liberation and against the nationalist Chetniks and what were the other guys? The Chetniks and Ustachi, to destroy these forms of nationalism by giving each ethnic or national group its own way to organize itself. Okay, so you have the different republics of Yugoslavia. but it was linked on an economic system, and the economic system was a kind of form of self-management of the factories. Now, that self-management of the factories was very strange. I think there was something wrong with it, because that self-management became a system of the different unities, productive unities, to fight each other. And when you do that, then you produce, of course, nationalism. But I think that helped, in the end, after Tito's death, to revive the nationalist residues in Yugoslavia, in the different countries, that was demagogically used by leaders to fight each region against another region, and which produced the civil war. But there's a very strange thing. Now, the European Union is against the independence of Catalonia. The European Union was not against independence of Slovenia, and was not against Slovenia, Slovakia, Slovenia, and all the other. Why is that? I think personally that there was a certain German interest, a very old German imperialist interest in the Balkan that supported those independent movements.